The air was thick with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Outside, the world was dusted with a blanket of snow, the kind that looked like it had been gently laid out by the hands of angels. It was Christmas Eve, a night meant for family, laughter, and the warmth of togetherness. The lights on the Christmas tree flickered gently, reflecting the glow of the fire crackling in the hearth. The stockings were hung, the dinner table set for a celebration, and everything felt just right, except for one thing. Sarah, my only daughter, wasn't home. I had been looking forward to this moment for weeks, planning the dinner menu, picking out the perfect Christmas decorations, and imagining how the evening would unfold. It was always a special time for us, a tradition that had remained unchanged for years. But this year, it felt different. Something in the air was off, a heavy sense of unease that I couldn't shake. I tried to push the feeling aside, telling myself that everything would be okay. After all, Christmas was about family, love, and togetherness, and Sarah was family. The phone call came around 5 in the evening, just as I was finishing the last touches on the meal. I recognized her number on the screen, and I felt a wave of relief. But when I answered, her voice wasn't the warm, cheerful one I expected. Instead, it was fragile, strained, almost as though she was holding back tears. My heart skipped a beat. "Mom," she started, her voice faltering. "I'm really sorry, but I can't come for Christmas dinner. I need to be with Mark's mom. She's really sick, and they need me. I hope you understand." I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest, a tightness that I couldn't explain. "Sarah, I thought we were having dinner together. I've been looking forward to this." My voice caught in my throat, but I tried not to let my disappointment show too much. After all, I understood the importance of family, and Mark's mother was in need. "I know, Mom. I'm really sorry. I didn't want to do this, but she's been so sick, and I just have to be there for her," she explained, her voice quivering. The silence between us stretched longer than it should have. I wanted to argue, to ask her to reconsider, to remind her of our tradition, but I knew that would only make her feel worse. So instead, I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "It's okay, Sarah. I understand. You should be with her." But even as the words left my mouth, a sharp ache pierced my heart. "I love you, Mom. I promise I'll make it up to you," she said softly before hanging up. I stood there for a moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, my hand trembling slightly. The empty chair at the table seemed to mock me, the one where Sarah would always sit, her laughter filling the air, her jokes and stories making everything seem lighter. Tonight, that chair would remain empty. I felt a knot in my stomach as I slowly placed the phone back in its cradle. The house, once full of light and cheer, now felt hollow, echoing with the silence of absence. The Christmas music played softly in the background, but it sounded distant, almost as if it belonged to someone else's home. I tried to shake the disappointment, telling myself that she was doing the right thing. Mark's mother was sick, and family was important. But the truth was, I felt abandoned. Sarah had always been my world, and now it seemed like she had chosen someone else over me, someone I barely knew, someone I wasn't sure I could trust. And as much as I tried to push the feelings aside, the hurt festered. The Christmas lights twinkled in the dim room, but they didn't bring the comfort they once did. Instead, They seemed to mock me with their beauty, their cheerfulness a stark contrast to the sadness I was feeling. I slowly made my way to the dinner table, where the meal I had prepared sat untouched. The candles flickered, casting long shadows across the tablecloth. I had set everything up perfectly, just as I always had. But tonight, the joy I usually felt was absent. I felt a hollowness inside, a void that no amount of food or decorations could fill. My daughter wasn't here, and in some ways it felt like Christmas had been stolen from me. I sent her a text, even though I knew she probably wouldn't respond right away. I miss you. I hope your mom feels better. I stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. I needed to let her know that I was thinking of her, that I understood, but I couldn't help feeling a little hurt by her decision. Dinner remained untouched. I sat at the table alone, my mind swirling with questions. Was I being unreasonable? Was I asking too much for her to spend this one night with me? But then, a darker thought crept into my mind. Was this just the beginning of her drifting away? How many more Christmases would I spend alone? As the evening wore on, I tried to distract myself. I picked at the food, watching the minutes tick by in silence. The once vibrant house now felt like a shell, empty and hollow, echoing with memories of better days. I looked out the window at the snowy landscape, watching the flakes drift gently to the ground, and I couldn't help but wonder how Sarah was really doing. Was she okay? Or was she struggling too, pretending to be fine while her heart ached for me as mine ached for her? In that moment, I knew things would never be the same again. Christmas, once a symbol of joy and family, had become a reminder of what I had lost. And as the night grew darker, I was left alone with my thoughts and my empty heart, wondering if this was the beginning of something even harder to come. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second feeling heavier than the last. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in a quiet stillness. But inside, the air was thick with the emptiness that had settled over my heart. The dinner I had spent hours preparing sat cold on the table, untouched and forgotten. The scent of roasted turkey, baked potatoes, and fresh bread still lingered in the room, but it didn't have the same warmth it once did. It felt like a cruel reminder of what I had hoped for, of what was supposed to be, a family gathering filled with laughter and love. Instead, the silence around me seemed deafening. I sat at the table, my hands resting on the cool surface of the cloth. The empty chair where Sarah usually sat seemed to mock me, as though it knew I was sitting alone. I wanted to call her again, to hear her voice, to tell her how much I missed her. But I held back. She had already explained herself, and part of me knew that calling again would only make her feel more guilty, more conflicted. I didn't want that. I didn't want her to feel like she had to choose between me and her other family. But the loneliness, the ache in my chest, it was unbearable. I picked up my phone, scrolling through social media in an attempt to distract myself. But everywhere I looked, there were pictures of families gathered around dinner tables, children laughing, and couples holding hands. It felt like the entire world was celebrating Christmas, while I sat in the shadow of my own sorrow. The familiar faces of friends and family posted their cheerful moments, their smiles so bright it almost stung. They didn't know what I was feeling, and I didn't know how to explain it to them. How could I put into words the emptiness that consumed me? I thought about Sarah's words earlier. She had promised she'd make it up to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The guilt had been clear in her voice, but there was also something else. Something she wasn't saying. I had known her all her life. I knew when something didn't feel right. Was she really just with her mother-in-law? Or was there more to the story? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the nagging thought wouldn't leave me. I tried to push it aside, telling myself that Sarah loved me, that she was just doing what she thought was best. But the silence in the house only made the questions grow louder. What if she had chosen them over me? What if she was tired of me, tired of the holidays with her mother? I had seen the strain in her face the last time we spoke, and maybe it had been building up for a while. Perhaps I had missed something. Perhaps I had been too caught up in my own expectations to see the cracks forming in our relationship. The hours seemed to drag on, stretching into an endless night. I sat in the living room, the soft hum of the Christmas music filling the space, but it didn't bring the comfort it once did. It only served to remind me of what should have been, a joyous celebration that had turned into a quiet and painful evening. I looked at the mantel, where the stockings hung, 3 of them, just as they always had. Sarah's, Mark's, and mine. I hadn't taken hers down yet, even though I had every right to. It seemed too soon, too final. I wasn't ready to face the fact that things had changed. I wasn't ready to admit that this Christmas, this once joyous occasion, had marked the beginning of something different, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. My phone buzzed suddenly and I grabbed it, hopeful that it was Sarah, perhaps, with an apology or an explanation. But when I looked at the screen, my heart sank. It was just a notification about a Christmas sale at a local store. I stared at it for a moment before putting the phone back down. The buzzing felt like an intrusion into my thoughts, a reminder that the world kept moving while my world seemed to have stopped. The house felt cold, the warmth of the fire now just a flicker in the distance. I had to find something to do to fill the time, to make the hours pass faster, but nothing seemed to matter. The dinner remained untouched, and the empty space beside me at the table grew wider with each passing minute. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through my messages, hoping for something, anything to distract me. But there was nothing from Sarah. Not a text, not a call. It was as though she had vanished, leaving me to pick up the pieces of what had once been a close relationship. I tried to tell myself that she was probably busy taking care of her mother-in-law, but the more I tried to convince myself, the more distant I felt from her. I wanted her to be here, to laugh with me, to share the joy of the season, but instead, I was left to fill the silence with my own thoughts. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but the weight of the night was too heavy. I thought back to all the Christmases we had spent together. How much had changed? How had we gone from being so close, so in sync, to this? Was this the beginning of something bigger? Was this the start of me losing her? I had always feared that one day I would be left behind, that the distance between us would grow too wide. But I never thought it would happen like this, on Christmas Eve, when I needed her the most. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away. I didn't want to cry, not on Christmas, not when I was supposed to be strong. But the emotions were overwhelming, and I didn't know how to stop them. It wasn't just the loneliness, it wasn't just the disappointment of Sarah not being there. It was the fear of change, of what it meant for our relationship, of what it meant for the future. I couldn't deny it anymore. Things were different now. My daughter had chosen her other family, and I had been left behind. I didn't know how to fix it, or if it could even be fixed. All I knew was that I was alone in a house that used to be filled with love, and the silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was the following morning when the notification pinged on my phone. I was sitting at the kitchen table, still, wearing the same sweater from the night before, my eyes tired from the lack of sleep. The house felt colder now, the aftermath of Christmas still hanging in the air. But the warmth of the season had long since dissipated. The silence was heavier today, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't escape. I glanced at the phone, not expecting anything special, maybe a reminder or a message from a friend checking in on how I was doing after the holiday. But when I saw the notification, I froze. It wasn't a message from Sarah. It wasn't a text from anyone I recognized. The image on the screen was of Sarah and Mark's mother, laughing, smiling, their faces sun-kissed by the bright golden light of the sun. They were sitting on a beach in Hawaii. My heart slammed in my chest. I blinked twice, making sure I wasn't imagining it. But no, the image was clear. Sarah, the girl who had promised me she couldn't be with me on Christmas, was there. She was smiling, carefree, sitting next to Mark's mother, their arms around each other like they were two best friends, basking in the warmth of a tropical vacation. My stomach churned, and my mind whirled with confusion and disbelief. I sat motionless, my fingers trembling as I stared at the picture on the screen. The Hawaiian backdrop was beautiful, the crystal blue water stretching endlessly behind them. They looked so happy, so at ease. A world away from the sick mother-in-law Sarah had told me she was tending to just days ago. How could she have lied to me like this? How could she have said she was needed, that she couldn't be here with me, only to find out she was on a vacation with the very woman she had claimed was too sick to be left alone? A surge of anger and betrayal shot through me, so intense I felt it in the pit of my stomach. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but instead I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. This couldn't be real. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I had misunderstood something. I scrolled down to see if there was any text or comment that would shed light on the situation. But there was nothing, just the picture. A pristine, beautiful picture of them both, smiling under the warm sun of a paradise I had never been to. I put the phone down slowly, my heart beating faster than before. I needed answers, but I didn't know where to find them. My mind raced, bouncing between confusion and frustration. Was Sarah really so comfortable with lying to me? Had she been planning this all along? Or had something happened that made her feel like she couldn't tell me the truth? I felt like I was drowning in a sea of questions, and the more I tried to grasp at them, the more elusive the answers became. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, not yet. I knew Sarah. I loved her. But how could I ignore the evidence in front of me? How could I ignore the fact that she had gone to Hawaii, a place she had never mentioned, a place where she was now enjoying herself, when she had told me her time was occupied with caring for someone else? The betrayal felt like a stab to the heart. How long had this been going on? Had she planned to leave me on Christmas all along? Or was this something that had just happened? I didn't know what to think, or if I even had the right to be angry. Decided to call her. My fingers hovered over the screen, dialing her number, but I hesitated. What would I say? How could I confront her without seeming irrational? What if she had a perfectly reasonable explanation? I thought about all the times we had shared, the close bond we once had, and the countless memories that made up our relationship. I didn't want to lose that, but I was terrified of what the truth might reveal. The phone rang and I held my breath, waiting for her voice to answer. But it went straight to voicemail. I felt a surge of panic. She was avoiding me. She was avoiding the truth. I left a message, trying to sound calm, even though my heart was pounding. Sarah, it's Mom. I saw the picture. I need to talk to you. Please call me back when you can. I need to understand what's going on. I hung up the phone and stared at it for a long time, hoping it would ring with her name flashing across the screen. But the silence that followed only deepened the ache in my chest. What was happening to my daughter? What was happening to us? The minutes passed by slowly, each one heavier than the last. I had no idea where Sarah was or when she would reach out. I wondered if she even cared enough to call me back, to explain herself, to make things right. Or maybe this was it. Maybe she had moved on from me, and the lie about Christmas was just the first step in her pulling away completely. I sat down in the living room, the picture of Sarah and her mother-in-law still burned into my mind. I couldn't stop seeing it, couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to rationalize it, tried to find an explanation that made sense, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like an intentional act of betrayal. She hadn't even told me about the trip, hadn't mentioned it once. All the times we had spoken on the phone before Christmas, all the promises she made to me, none of them had been true. What hurt the most wasn't just the lie. It was the secrecy, the sense that she was hiding something from me, something important. And now, I didn't know how to face her. I didn't know how to pick up the pieces of our relationship when I felt so deeply hurt by her actions. The phone didn't ring. I kept checking it, willing it to light up with her name, but it stayed dark. And with each passing minute, I felt more and more disconnected from her. I didn't know how we had gone from a mother and daughter who shared everything to two people separated by lies and silence. The love I had for Sarah still burned bright, but it was smothered now, buried beneath layers of doubt and hurt. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the snow-covered yard, trying to clear my mind. The cold winter landscape outside seemed to mirror the coldness I felt inside. I wanted to reach out to Sarah, to understand what had happened, but I didn't know if I could handle what the truth might bring. The silence stretched on for hours after I had left Sarah the voicemail. The house, once full of potential joy and anticipation for a family holiday, now seemed even more desolate. I tried to keep busy, organizing a few things around the house, but everything felt pointless. I couldn't shake the picture I had seen. The image of Sarah smiling on a beach in Hawaii with Mark's mother. It played in my mind on a loop like a broken record, and with every turn of the needle, the pain in my chest grew heavier. I couldn't help but feel betrayed, abandoned on a holiday when I had believed above all that family came first. I had spent the entire morning waiting for Sarah's call, but it never came. Each passing minute made my anger bubble closer to the surface, and I knew I couldn't let this go unanswered. Something in me, some inner voice, told me to take action, to stop letting her slip away without a real explanation. I stood up abruptly, walked to the phone, and dialed her number again, this time more resolute. It rang once, twice, and then a familiar voice answered, but it wasn't the one I expected. The voice on the other end was calm, distant, and guarded. "Mom? I saw your message. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you sooner," Sarah said, her tone hesitant, like she wasn't sure how to approach the conversation. I could hear the faint hum of what sounded like a busy restaurant in the background, and I froze. She was at a restaurant, not at Mark's mother's side, not in some quiet, solemn home caring for someone sick. A bitter wave of realization crashed over me. "Where are you, Sarah?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. I was trying to keep control, but the hurt slipped through anyway. "You said you were with her taking care of her. You told me you couldn't come because she needed you." "I know, and I'm so sorry, Mom," she replied, her voice shaking now. "I thought I was doing the right thing at the time, but I messed up. I lied to you." Her words felt like a punch to the stomach. Lied? About what, Sarah? About Christmas? About being there for me when I needed you? She sighed deeply, the sound filled with the weight of regret. "Yes. About that. And about where I really was. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to disappoint you. I thought maybe if I didn't tell you the whole truth, it wouldn't hurt as much." I held my breath, fighting the sting of tears. "What didn't you want to tell me, Sarah? What's going on?" "You sent me a picture, Sarah. A picture of you, happy and relaxed on a beach in Hawaii with Mark's mom. Where was the sick woman you told me about? Where was your sense of honesty?" "I didn't know what to do," she repeated, her voice cracking. I thought you wouldn't understand. I felt trapped between the two of you, between my family and his. But I've been selfish, Mom. I see that now. I should have been honest with you." There was a long pause. The silence hung in the air like a thick fog. I wanted to yell, to demand why she hadn't told me the truth, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, gripping the phone tightly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "I regret it. I really do." I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. This wasn't how I had imagined this conversation would go. I had envisioned a heartfelt explanation, a moment where Sarah apologized for being insensitive, and we moved on. But instead, there was a deep rift between us, one that words alone couldn't heal. "You don't get it, Sarah," I said, my voice low but firm. "It's not just about the lie. It's not just about Christmas. It's about how I feel. I feel abandoned, Sarah. I feel like you chose them over me. I spent Christmas alone because of your choice. And now, I don't even know what's real anymore. Everything we had feels shattered." "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I thought it would be easier if I kept the truth from you. But now I see I was wrong." The words hung there, unspoken, heavy in the air. I didn't know how to move past this, how to get back to the place where Sarah and I could talk freely, without this tension, without the distance growing wider between us. "I need some time, Sarah. I finally said, the words coming out more calmly than I felt. I don't know if I can forgive you right now. I need to think. There was another pause before she responded, her voice barely above, a whisper. I understand, Mom. I won't pressure you. I just want you to know how deeply sorry I am. I'll make it right. I promise. I hung up without saying anything else. The house felt emptier now than before, and even though Sarah had apologized, something inside me had shifted. The trust between us had been broken, and even though I could feel her remorse, the hurt was still fresh. It wasn't just about this one Christmas, this one lie. It was about how she had chosen to distance herself from me, how she had hidden her true intentions behind a veil of excuses. I walked to the window, looking out at the snow once again. The world outside seemed to carry on, untouched by the turbulence of my emotions. My thoughts were a blur, my heart torn between love and disappointment. Sarah's apology had been heartfelt, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. Could I forgive her? Or was this the beginning of a new reality, one where I would have to let go of the idea of her always being there for me? The days following the confrontation were filled with a heavy silence. It wasn't the same silence I had experienced on Christmas night. This silence was different. It wasn't empty, but it wasn't yet filled with anything whole or healing. The rift between Sarah and me was palpable. I could feel it in every room I walked into, in every corner of the house that once held memories of us together, laughing, talking, sharing. Now, the walls felt cold, like they were keeping the distance between us. I had spent the first few days after our conversation in a haze, not knowing how to process everything. I had the overwhelming urge to push Sarah away, to protect myself from the pain of her betrayal, but I couldn't ignore the fact that she was still my daughter. She had made a mistake, a huge one, but the love I had for her hadn't disappeared overnight. Yet, my heart was torn between my need for space to process what had happened and my desire to heal the bond we had. Sarah called me several times in those first few days, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to look her in the eyes again without seeing that picture of her on the beach, her smile so carefree and distant from the hurt I was feeling. But I knew she was waiting for me to forgive her. She had apologized more than once, but each apology seemed to only echo in the silence, offering no resolution, no way forward. I needed time, but I didn't know how much time. It was the 4th evening after our last conversation when I finally decided to call her back. I had been sitting alone in the living room, the house dimly lit, and for the first time in days, I had an overwhelming need to reconnect. I couldn't go on like this, letting the hurt fester and the distance grow. I needed to hear her voice, to understand her side, and perhaps to try to understand myself in all of this. When she answered, I could hear the shakiness in her voice. Mom? I've been waiting for your call. I've been so scared you would never forgive me. Months passed since that Christmas, since the confrontation that had nearly torn us apart. Life had slowly begun to return to normal, but things were different now. Sarah and I had spent weeks, then months, rebuilding what had been broken. The road wasn't easy, and there were still moments when the pain of the betrayal would resurface, uninvited, reminding us both of the distance we'd once had. But there was also something new, something hopeful. growing between us. It was a tentative, fragile thing, like a sprout breaking through the ground after a long winter, but it was real. The first time Sarah came over after our long conversations, I remember how my heart raced. She had spent the afternoon running errands and had called to say she was on her way. I hadn't asked her to come. She had simply told me she wanted to. It was her idea, not mine. And that made all the difference. When the doorbell rang, I felt a strange mix of nerves and anticipation. I opened the door to see her standing there, a hesitant but genuine smile on her face. She looked older, in some ways. More mature, perhaps. Less carefree than she had been before everything had happened. There was an air of seriousness about her now, a quiet understanding of the consequences of her actions. And though she had apologized many times, seeing her standing on the threshold, I realized she had learned something deep from what had occurred between us. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, holding up a small package in her hand. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, with twine tied around it. Nothing fancy, but the simplicity of it felt meaningful in a way I couldn't explain. I got you something. I thought it might help." I blinked, surprised by the gesture. I had expected her to simply visit, to talk, to spend time with me. But this was different. It was more than that. She had thought ahead, thought of me even when we weren't together, and that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. I smiled, opening the door wider for her to come in. "You didn't have to, sweetheart. But I'm curious now." "What is it?" She stepped inside, her eyes bright but a little nervous, like she wasn't sure how I would react. She handed me the package, and I sat down carefully, unwrapping it slowly, savoring the moment. Inside was a small, leather-bound notebook, the kind that seemed simple, yet carried a sense of depth in its design. There was something about it that felt personal, almost intimate. I remember when we used to write in notebooks together, when you'd tell me stories about your childhood, Sarah said, her voice soft. I thought, maybe it would be nice if we could do that again. Not necessarily write, but just talk. Without anything in the way. No walls, no pretenses. Just us, like we used to be. I looked at the notebook in my hands, my eyes stinging, with unshed tears. This wasn't just a gift. It was an invitation to heal, to open up again, to rebuild the closeness we once had. I had always been the one to encourage her to talk, to share her thoughts and dreams with me. And now she was doing the same. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. "I think I'd like that," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I think we both could use that." We sat together on the couch, her eyes watching me carefully as I traced the edges of the notebook, feeling the weight of it in my hands. For a moment, I felt lost in time, like we were back to when things were simple, before lies and misunderstandings had clouded our relationship. The distance between us, the one that had been so wide just a few months ago, seemed to shrink, just a little, in that quiet moment. "You know, Mom," Sarah began, her voice tentative, "I don't think I realized how much I hurt you. I always thought I was doing the right thing, trying to keep everyone happy, but I see now that I put you last. I'm sorry for that. You were never last to me. You were always my first." I took a deep breath, my heart swelling with emotion. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, the way she was truly grappling with her actions, trying to understand where she had gone wrong. It wasn't just an apology. It was a recognition of the hurt she had caused and a commitment to never let it happen again. Sarah, I don't need grand gestures. I don't need gifts, I said, looking at her. I just need you to be honest with me. I need to know that I'm still a priority in your life, that we can still be a team. That's all I want. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded, slowly. You are a priority, Mom. Always. I promise. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed her. We spent the rest of the evening talking, not about the past, but about the future. We talked about plans, about things we wanted to do together. It wasn't about reliving the hurt. It was about moving forward, one small step at a time. There was no magic fix, no instant reconciliation. Healing takes time, and there would still be moments of pain, of doubt. But in that moment, as we sat together, I felt something shift in the air between us. It was a sense of understanding, of commitment to each other, of a willingness to rebuild. As the night wore on, we laughed about old memories, about things that had once seemed so important but now seemed trivial. And even though the scars of what had happened would always be there, they didn't define us anymore. What defined us now was the love we still had for each other, the willingness to forgive, to move forward, to grow together. I think this is a new beginning, I said softly as I closed the notebook and set it aside. A fresh start. Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with a warmth I hadn't seen in a long time. I think so too, Mom. A new beginning. And in that moment, I knew that we were on our way. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be perfect. But as long as we were together, as long as we had each other, we could face whatever came our way. This was the beginning of a new chapter, and I was ready to turn the page.